Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining the Talk Shop Show with Erica Aguilar, the Senior Vice President of Complete CU Services, and myself, Pierre-Jean Galland, the CEO of Complete CU Services. Today, as usual, we have a very, very interesting guest, Matt McGuire from the AML Shop, a terrific personality as well as a great professional. Continuance of what you talked about, FINTRAC. I find that very interesting because I have not experienced that yet, where I see that FINTRAC goes a little bit beyond. But I often wondered, and like if they're revising their methodology. And one of the things that's a major irritant, has always been an irritant to me, is when the FINTRAC examination comes out and it was like, well, you know, the purpose of opening the account was for savings and that wasn't sufficient, whatever. I mean, that control to me is a complete waste of time, because there's nobody who's going to open an account and say, what's the purpose of this? And say, well, I'm you know, part of the Hells Angels, and I'm you know, selling drugs, and we're going to exchange that through this account, and you know, it goes directly, a percentage goes to the mafia. So nobody's going to answer that. So and one of the things that I was wondering, perhaps you have an answer to it, but there's a lot of credit unions that, you know what, they have a bond. All of their, or like about 95% of their membership is, you know, salaried employees. There's not much, you know, like in terms of LCTRs or UTRs, there's no, like maybe one or two a year. It's like, but yet, there's a lot of controls put around that. And as you said, I mean, there are, you know, some places that have three FTEs working on AML when there's hardly any risk. And yet FINTRAC will go in and look at their policies and say, well, you're missing this in your policies. A more meaningful examination process.
Yeah, you know, it is heartening to see, because, you know, the whole purpose of this risk-based approach is to find the risk and then deploy resources towards it, right? And so if you're spending all your time on occupation, you're spending it on the wrong place. But there has been, so it really is higher level analysis, and the, you know, the examiners that have been coming in, and the method they've been coming in with is really, they even bypass some of the old tests. Like in a few of the examinations, there's been no test of ID, where they start from, you know what, we saw you did this poorly last time. We're going to look at that specific area, right? The very definition of high risk. And then next, we're going to isolate some clients. And in that way, what's the magical thing that's happening is the training along the way, which is, how does FINTRAC think about these transactions and these indicators, and where the threshold is for suspicious? That's meaningful to me, right? If we're actually trying for outcomes, if we're actually trying to develop intelligence and actually trying to put bad guys in jails and deprive them of their houses and cars and vacations, then we need to be focused on that risk.
One of the questions I had, Matt, was in terms of, like, you know, I think a lot of the credit unions, especially, they're really worried and have some anxiety around what was done in the past. And you know, examples are, especially with a lot of mergers with different credit unions, they had different systems, different ways of capturing, you know, occupation and all that. And obviously some of them, you know, preceded 2001, or
sure
things started getting really when it was, you know, basically OSFI's mandate to create or to create more controls around that. So what I tell credit unions are, you know what, try to get as much information as you can as a best effort, but then, you know, don't spend your whole, you know, don't try to pick up some things that are in a vault somewhere in an old box that to try to fill in your data, but do a best efforts, make a project, and maybe just do a 3-month project to try to get that information. But then after that, present that business case to FINTRAC and forget it and move on, right? So, and maybe I'm not giving them right advice, but how would FINTRAC view that?
Well, yeah, I think you're largely right. I think that first, the point is always document, right? FINTRAC has been sympathetic, in my view, to instances where you've identified a problem and you've undertaken measures to fix it. And they've finally put in writing that if you voluntarily disclose these faults prior to notice of an examination, and it's not part of a repeated pattern of issues, there'll be some clemency. That's a good thing, right? So I'm always tending towards voluntarily disclosed because, and actually, just as a sidebar there, in the new penalty calculations, the way that they used to calculate penalties, they would actually hold it against you that you'd voluntarily disclosed. It was actually a factor in their calculation that would say, listen, we'll penalize you more if you've had voluntary disclosures. They've taken that away. The new penalty calculation description just says that if you've had a penalty for a past violation that's the same, that it'll impact the calculation, which is great. It means that the violation has been tested rather than just being a deficiency letter. But you're right. Most of these ID obligations were prospective, right? So for instance, the ongoing monitoring obligation says that you have to keep client information up to date. Well, it's the client information you have. The interesting take that OSFI had at one point was they should be considered high risk because you don't have as much certainty about their ID. Well, that sounds logical until you get down and say, well, hold on. The member by this point is 85. She gets her CPP. She pays her rent. And then the cycle rinses and repeats itself, right? So, you can take very logical and risk-based approaches, even at the federal level. OSFI is very sympathetic to these exercises that are risk sensitive and that they're proportionate to cost. We don't want to spend all our compliance money on archaic exercises.